Love Song Podcast, a Love Song media production. I'm T Love. Welcome into today's episode. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Shirts and More, located at 2517 Jacob Street in Wheeling, West Virginia. Shirts and More is a family-owned business, and for over 40 years, they have been providing the best and most professional garments on the market. Let Tracy, Braxton, Dana, or any of the friendly staff at Shirts and More help you with your next apparel need. You can contact them directly at 304-232-2030. Let them know T-Love sent you. I'll guarantee you they'll take care of you. Today's episode is episode 30. We're going to take a look at the U.S. Department of Education and the fraud that comes with it. Articles of impeachment have been filed against Linda McMahon. Representative Suzanne Bonamici, a Democrat out of Oregon, introduced a resolution on Wednesday, June the 25th, to impeach the U.S. Secretary of Education McMahon and former WWE executive for high crimes and misdemeanors. Heard this before, right? The resolution accuses McMahon of breaking federal law by moving Department of Education offices and programs to other federal agencies without approval from Congress. The second article in the resolution alleges that McMahon made several false statements to Congress, and the third accuses her of breaching the public trust. It's that last part we're going to take a long, hard look at here shortly. Congress.gov lists the resolution as H.R. 1391, impeaching Linda M. McMahon, Secretary of Education, for high crimes and misdemeanors. Secretary McMahon, quoting here, Secretary McMahon has betrayed students, families, and educators by dismantling and demolishing the Department of Education, something she does not have the authority to do, said Congresswoman Bonamici. Continuing, Congress created the department, and it would take an act of Congress to shut it down. About 90% of the students in the country attend public schools. Students have the right to equal access without discrimination, and students with disabilities have the right to a free and appropriate education. End quote. She goes on further to say, I will not stand by and let Secretary McMahon destroy the federal programs, funding, and research that are critical to public schools and the millions of students they serve. Since taking office, McMahon has unlawfully ordered the transfer of at least 5 offices and their programs to other agencies, all without the consent of Congress. These transfers essentially gut the Department of Education and obstruct the department's ability to conduct statutory oversight and disperse federal funds appropriated by Congress through its authority under Article 1 of the United States Constitution. Bonamici revealed on June 17th that she planned to file the articles of impeachment. Okay. Well, let's take a look at Representative Suzanne Bonamici. It's worth noting that Suzanne Marie Bonamici is an American lawyer. There's your first problem. And politician serving as the U.S. representative for Oregon's 1st Congressional District, a seat she first was elected to in a 2012 special election. 2012 special election. That's going to come in handy here in just a few minutes. Keep your eyes on that one. The district includes most of Portland, west of Walmeda River, along with most of Portland's western suburbs, such as Beaverton, Hillsborough, Tigard, and Lake Oswego. Representative Bonamici was a sitting congresswoman in 2012, which means she was sitting in Congress in 2016 when President Barack Obama unethically and immoral took over the Department of Education. And you say, well, T-Love, what do you mean he took over? Well, let's take a look at that. In May of 2016, the Obama administration used the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. Talk about, I'm not even going to say it. In May of 2016, the Obama administration used the Department of Education and the Department of Justice to issue a joint directive to all U.S. public districts, instructing them to allow transgender students to use restrooms and locker rooms that align with their gender identity. The administration interpreted Title IX, the federal civil rights law that bans sex-based discrimination in federally funded education, to also protect students against discrimination based on gender identity. Requirements for the schools. The guidance required schools to treat transgender students consistent with the gender identity and address them by their preferred names or pronouns, and grant them access to facilities aligning with their gender identity rather than the sex they were assigned at birth. Schools that did not comply with these directives risk losing federal education funding. The directive sparked intense political and legal battles. Several states and school districts sued the administration, arguing federal overreach. Later that year, a federal judge in Texas temporarily blocked the directive from being enforced nationwide. Following a change in administrations, the Trump administration officially withdrew this guidance in 2017. You can read more on the specific history and policies in the Pace Law Library Title IX Guide, or review the PBS NewsHour report on the original directive. Let's take a look at the Department of Education before I go to bashing. So the countries with the best education systems include Denmark, Sweden, the UK, and Finland. They rank as having the best education systems in the world. Top-ranked countries typically combine strong early childhood education, well-trained teachers, and more equitable school systems, all of which enable stronger and more consistent student outcomes on international benchmarks. The countries with the worst education systems include Cambodia, El Salvador, Myanmar, and Honduras. They rank as having the worst education systems in the world. Lower-ranked countries often face challenges such as a limited access to schooling, lower literacy rates, underfunded education systems, and barriers to consistent student attendance and completion. The bottom 5 states in the United States in education include number 1, West Virginia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Mississippi. So for all of you that always talk about Mississippi being the worst school districts, state, whatever in the United States, you can knock that off, because they are now 5th. West Virginia, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Kentucky are now your top 4. The top 5 education states in America include Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland, and New York. You can explore more detailed state report cards through the National Center of Education Statistics. The data shows America's education has broadly declined over the last decade. A national assessment from Stanford and Harvard universities found that students' reading and math scores began dropping around 2013, with reading down in 83% and math down in 70% of U.S. school districts compared to a decade prior. Again, this data is not from 26 back to 16. It is from 2023 back to 2013. I also find it really interesting that in 1979 and 1980, Congress created the cabinet-level U.S. Department of Education to consolidate education programs and ensure equal access. Furthermore, Robert Maxwell's media empire, you know who Robert Maxwell is, right? The Mossad agent, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Yeah, that guy. Robert Maxwell's media empire was a major supplier to the U.S. education system. Through his holding company, Maxwell Communication Corporation, he aggressively expanded into the American education publishing in the late 1980s by acquiring major textbook and testing companies. In the 1970s and 80s, the U.S. educational publishing market was dominated by a handful of massive independent publishing corporations. The big three school textbook and reference publishers during this era included McGraw-Hill, Prentice Hall, and Macmillan. I would highly, highly recommend all Americans to research the American education system. There are certain groups of people who controlled the textbooks. Most of you, what you're going to find is that group of people that you're not supposed to talk about out loud, or you'll get canceled and you just can't say anything. You're bad. And how those textbooks were written for propaganda purposes, not educational purposes. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the history that is taught in those 70s and 80s as it relates to our government, as it relates to our wars that we had been in, and it has continued since that time, was not written properly. It was not written accurately. I can tell you, as someone who is of Native American descent, that the American history books are not written properly. When you talk about the American government and the Native Americans and the war that went on and how they stole the land, and I'm not going to get into all that. I can just tell you from information passed down from generation to generation, what we read in our textbooks and what is told by the ancestors ain't the same. Okay? So let's go all the way back if we can, and let's break this down just a little bit. So Representative Suzanne Bonamici has introduced articles of impeachment against Linda McMahon, the Department of Education Secretary. And she's doing so for high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, this particular Congresswoman, Bonamici, out of Oregon, Democrat, was sitting in Congress when Barack Obama hijacked the Department of Education, using the Department of Justice as his weapon, if you will, and basically holding the public schools in the United States of America hostage. You either comply with my transgender policies, or you will not get your federal funding. I've taken a lot of time. If you go back and look at my episodes, you will see where I will bash Donald Trump to no end over the Epstein files. I will bash him to no end over the Iran war. I will bash him where I believe he is wrong, which is my right as an American. I will also bash Bush 43. I will bash Biden and Obama. I will bash anybody. Because at the end of the day, I am not a Democrat and I am not a Republican. I am an American. Just a plain old everyday guy that has common sense, that can tell you that when the most powerful man in the United States of America has to use the Department of Education and get the Department of Justice to back him up, to leverage that Department of Education to pass a policy to allow people into a bathroom who are mentally and emotionally unstable to not be able to look down and see that they got a wee-wee and not a hoo-ha and say, oh, I got to go in the girls' room. No. Anybody with any morals, ethics, values, principles will tell you that's wrong. Bonamici and all of the Democrats who supported this didn't call down the thunder on Barack Obama, didn't call for articles of impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors. I can't think of a higher crime or a stronger misdemeanor case that you can bring upon someone than inflicting emotional and mental abuse upon children. But they said nothing. Nothing. But now, this Democrat out of Oregon, Bonamici, wants to file articles of impeachment against Secretary of Department of Education Linda McMahon. Interesting. But she didn't say anything when Barack Obama started attacking Title IX and started telling schools that you will not get your money if you don't abide by my policies. And in today's world, you now have boys who are being allowed to participate in girl sports. They're allowed to be able to dress in the girls' locker rooms. I watch a lot of different podcasts, Tucker Carlson being one of the biggest ones that I watch. But I also like to watch Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines was a next level athlete, swimmer, and had to go through the battles of Mia Thomas, who was actually not a girl, it was a guy. And I have watched Riley Gaines's podcast, and I've seen her on several interviews where she talks about how uncomfortable it was to watch a grown man, when he took off his bathing suit, he had a wee-wee, not a hoo-ha. And all those girls in that locker room had hoo-has, not a wee-wee. And the NCAA allowed this. High schools across this country, mostly in Democrat states, certainly in Democrat cities, are allowing track and field stars and, cross country and, swimming. And, you had the boxing incident in the Olympics a couple of years ago where the alleged man was fighting in the women's division and was hurting these women. And my question is as someone with common sense, morals, values, principles, how sick do you have to be in your head to allow a man to beat up on a woman? To allow a man into a girl's locker room? To allow boys inside girls' dressing rooms? I did not put it in my production sheets, but I did study on it. There was a case, I think it was in Virginia. They are not a sponsor, but I would love it if they would sponsor. Please, thank you. There was a case in Virginia where a boy at birth was allowed into the girls' bathrooms and the girls' locker rooms, and he had committed sexual assault upon at least one girl. And there was a brouhaha over it, and nobody did anything about it, and the little boy transferred to another school district where he did it again. This time they took some legal action. All of this could have been avoided if Barack Obama would not have perpetrated immorality upon our kids. I can't think of any higher crimes than that. But then again, Barack Obama, Bush 43, Trump, Biden, Trump again, they're all suppressing the Epstein files. This Bonamici lady is a Democrat, as I stated many times over. She's one of the Congress people who voted no on a bill that had it of passed, it would have outed her colleagues who had been charged or alleged to have committed sexual misconduct, harassment, and things of that nature, and they all voted against it. So every single one of them, Democrat and Republican alike, let me be clear, they're all up there posturing about the Epstein files and how they want to get them released and this, that, and the other. No, they don't. If they did, they would have voted to out their own in Congress, the Senate, for committing some of the same stuff. Most Americans do not know that there is a taxpayer fund slush fund. The United States citizens and their tax money has funded a slush fund that when these elected officials are accused of sexual misconduct and things of this nature, they pay their hush money out of our tax money. I've said this on a previous podcast, but Mark Wayne Mullen, when Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was getting grilled on Capitol Hill for his confirmation, and whether you like Pete Hegseth or don't, that's not even the point here. The Democrats was running him through the ringer about his alcoholism and his womanizing, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. He has a history of binge drinking. He has a history of cheating and womanizing. So certainly, I don't think they were off limits. The problem is that every single one of the Democrats they all were doing the same thing. It was like parakeeting. That's what I didn't like. It's like y'all all had your little cue cards and it was just bashing over, sex and alcohol. And then at that moment, then Senator Mark Wayne Mullen out of Oklahoma, who is now the DHS secretary, told all of the senators, asked them, how many of you have gotten a divorce because you got caught cheating on your wife? And then he dropped another bomb and said, how many of you have showed up in our late night voting sessions and been so drunk you probably shouldn't even have been in here, but you still cast that vote drunk? I like that kind of talk. I like when people call down the thunder on other people's hypocrisy. I have no problem if you're standing on a moral high ground and you've never cheated and you've never showed up drunk to vote and you've never done this and I got no problem with you being morally higher than everybody else. None. In fact, I wish that's what we had, right? But instead, the elected officials of the United States of America are some of the most corrupt, compromised, immoral, unethical individuals on the face of this planet. I do not, for the life of me, understand how any of them keep their license to practice law, because most of them are attorneys. And man, I find it harsh that Bonamici wants to hold Secretary McMahon to a higher standard than she did President Barack Obama. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my problem with our government. You got Democrats, you got Republicans, and you got no Americans. It's not about the American public anymore. It's not about the American dream. It's not about the American values. It's not about the American principles. It's not about in God we trust anymore. It's about your donors, your special interest groups, your lobbyists, who's paying who. It's pathetic. I was watching Stephen A. Smith's podcast the other night, and Stephen A. Smith called down the Clintons, and he called down the Obamas. This is what I love about Stephen A. He's like I am. He doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. If you're wrong, you're wrong. I don't agree with everything Stephen A. says. I largely agree with a lot of what he says. He's got his own little style, right? Bravo to Stephen A. He's found his niche in life. He's really crafty at it, and he does a good job of it. But he called down the Obamas and the Clintons. How in the world did you serve 8 years in the White House? And you're worth over $100 million. You didn't get that money, honestly. Bravo, Stephen A. Bravo. I appreciate everyone tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we are all just one diagnosis, one phone call, or one accident away from living a much different life. I implore you, stay humble, be kind, show your love, and until I meet you on the next episode, take care.